The wedding day. The morning sun cast golden rays through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Cathedral, painting rainbow patterns across the marble floor. It should have been a perfect day for a wedding. Yet Dorothy Mary Blackwell sat in the third row, her hands folded in her lap, watching the elaborate ceremony unfold with a mixture of sadness and quiet resignation. At 62, Dorothy had learned to mask her emotions well. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she wore a simple navy dress that spoke of understated wealth rather than ostentation. To most observers, she appeared to be just another wedding guest, perhaps a distant relative or family friend. They had no idea they were looking at one of the most influential philanthropists in the city. The bride, Linda Patterson, soon to be Linda Thornfield, glided down the aisle in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. The intricate beadwork caught the light with every step, and the 15-foot train required 3 attendants to manage. Linda's father, James Patterson, beamed with pride as he walked beside his daughter, his chest puffed out in his custom-tailored morning coat. Dorothy's heart clenched as she watched the procession. 25 years ago, she had walked down this very same aisle, young and hopeful, believing in forever. She had been Mary then. Dorothy Mary, though everyone called her Mary. She had married Robert Thornfield, the man who now stood at the altar waiting for his second bride. The irony wasn't lost on her. Robert, at 58, had aged well. His dark hair was now silver at the temples, and his face carried the lines of a man who had lived fully. He stood confidently in his black morning coat, a slight smile playing at his lips as he watched his bride approach. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way that Dorothy realized he hadn't looked during the final years of their marriage. The officiant, Father Benedict, raised his voice to address the congregation. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Robert James Thornfield and Linda Marie Patterson in holy matrimony." Dorothy closed her eyes briefly, remembering her own words from decades past. The same words, the same promises, the same hopes. She had meant every syllable then. She wondered if Linda did now. "Marriage is not a commitment to be entered into lightly," Father Benedict continued, his voice echoing through the cathedral. "It requires dedication, sacrifice, and the willingness to put another's needs before your own." The irony of those words hit Dorothy like a physical blow. She had indeed put Robert's needs first, his career, his social ambitions, his desire for a certain lifestyle. She had supported him through law school when they had nothing, worked 2 jobs to pay for his education, and then gracefully stepped into the role of the perfect political wife when his career took off. She had been the one to host the dinner parties that built his network, the one to remember the names and preferences of every important contact, the one to smooth over his occasional social missteps with charm and grace. When he decided to run for city council, she had organized his entire campaign. When he set his sights on the mayor's office, she had been his most trusted advisor. And through it all, she had managed her own business empire in the shadows. What had started as a small investment firm had grown into a multi-million-dollar operation. She had used her wealth quietly, anonymously, helping families in need, supporting local charities, and even, though Robert never knew, helping his political career by ensuring favorable coverage in newspapers she secretly owned, shares in. "Do you, Robert James Thornfield, take Linda Marie Patterson to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Father Benedict's question brought Dorothy back to the present. "I do," Robert replied, his voice strong and certain. Dorothy felt something shift inside her chest. Not heartbreak. She had processed that years ago, during the divorce proceedings. This was something else, something more like liberation. She had spent 3 years since their divorce wondering if she had made the right choice in letting him go so easily. Sitting here now, watching him pledge his love to another woman, she realized that she had. The ceremony continued with Linda's vows, her voice trembling slightly with emotion as she promised to love, honor, and cherish. Dorothy found herself studying the young woman. Linda was 32, 26 years younger than Robert, and beautiful in an obvious way that commanded attention. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect Hollywood waves, her makeup flawless, her figure enviable even in her 20s, let alone her 30s. But it wasn't Linda's youth or beauty that bothered Dorothy. It was the way she looked at Robert, with a kind of calculated adoration that seemed more about what he could provide than who he was. Dorothy recognized it because she had seen that same look in the mirror during the early days of her own marriage, before love had matured into something deeper and more complex. As the couple exchanged rings, Dorothy's gaze wandered to the Patterson family in the front row. James Patterson sat with his wife, Margaret, both of them radiating satisfaction. Next to them were Linda's siblings, her brother Michael and sister Sarah, along with their spouses and children. They were an attractive family, well-dressed and confident, the picture of upper-middle-class success. What they didn't know, what no one in this cathedral knew except Dorothy, was that their picture-perfect life had been built on a foundation that she had quietly provided. 3 years ago, when James Patterson's construction company had been on the verge of bankruptcy due to a series of bad investments and a lawsuit that threatened to destroy everything, an anonymous investor had stepped in. The investor had not only saved the company, but had provided the capital for its expansion, turning it into one of the most successful construction firms in the region. That investor had been Dorothy. She had done it not out of love for the Patterson family, she had never even met them before today, but because Robert had mentioned in passing during their divorce proceedings that he was concerned about his girlfriend's family's financial troubles. Even in the midst of their own painful separation, Dorothy had found herself unable to bear the thought of Robert suffering because of someone else's misfortune. It had been easy enough to arrange. A series of shell companies, some carefully orchestrated market moves, and a few strategic partnerships had not only saved Patterson Construction, but had made it thrive. The family believed their success was due to James's business acumen and a lucky break in the form of several large municipal contracts that Dorothy had ensured they received through her connections and influence. The irony was exquisite. James Patterson had spent the last 3 years boasting about his business savvy and his family's rise in social status. Margaret Patterson had joined the country club board and started hosting charity luncheons. Michael Patterson had started his own real estate development firm with capital borrowed against the construction company's newfound success. Sarah Patterson had been able to quit her job and focus on her art, opening a gallery that Dorothy also secretly supported through anonymous purchases and strategic recommendations to her wealthy friends. All of it, every bit of their current comfort and status, was built on Dorothy's quiet generosity. And after today, after watching Robert marry into this family that she had made prosperous, she was going to take it all away. The decision had crystallized in her mind during Father Benedict's sermon about commitment and sacrifice. She had sacrificed enough. She had been generous enough. She had supported Robert's happiness long enough, even at the cost of her own peace of mind. "You may kiss the bride," Father Benedict announced, and the cathedral erupted in applause. Dorothy watched as Robert lifted Linda's veil and kissed her with obvious passion. The photographers captured every angle, and she knew these images would grace the society pages tomorrow. The perfect couple, the perfect wedding, the perfect life. She stood with the rest of the congregation as the newlyweds made their way back down the aisle, beaming and radiant. Linda's train swept behind her like a river of silk and pearls, and Robert's hand rested protectively on her arm. They looked like they had stepped out of a fairy tale. As they passed Dorothy's row, Robert's eyes met hers for just a moment. There was a flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or maybe surprise at her presence. She had not RSVP'd to the wedding invitation, had not spoken to him since their final meeting with lawyers 18 months ago. But she had known she needed to be here, needed to witness this moment for her own closure. She nodded slightly, a gesture that could have been simple acknowledgement or farewell. Robert's step faltered almost imperceptibly, but Linda's radiant smile and the pressure of the moment carried him forward. The recession continued as family and friends followed the couple down the aisle. Dorothy remained seated, letting the crowd flow around her like water around a stone. She watched the Patterson family, James's chest still puffed with pride, Margaret dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, Michael and Sarah grinning broadly as they followed their sister and new brother-in-law toward the cathedral doors. When the last of the guests had filed out, Dorothy finally stood. The cathedral was nearly empty now, save for a few elderly parishioners who moved slowly, and the church staff beginning to clean up the flower petals scattered on the marble floor. She walked quietly to the side altar, where a bank of votive candles flickered in red glass holders. She dropped a $20 bill into the donation box and lit a single candle, not for any specific prayer or intention, but simply as a ritual of closing. "Beautiful ceremony," said Father Benedict, approaching, his ceremonial robes rustling softly. She had known him for years. He had officiated at several charity events she had organized, but like most people, he knew her only as a generous donor, not as Robert's ex-wife. Yes, it was. "Are you a friend of the family?" he asked, his tone gently curious. Dorothy considered the question. "I suppose you could say that." "I've known Robert for a very long time." Father Benedict nodded. "He seems very happy. Marriage is a blessed institution when entered into with the right intentions. Indeed, though I've always believed that actions speak louder than intentions." She left the priest with that cryptic comment and walked toward the cathedral's main doors. Outside, she could see the wedding party posing for photographs on the steps, Linda's dress spread around her like spilled cream, Robert's arm around her waist as he gazed adoringly at his new wife. She slipped out through a side door, avoiding the crowd. Her driver, Harold, was waiting by her black Mercedes, as reliable as always. He had been with her for 15 years, one of the few people who knew the full extent of her business operations and philanthropic activities. "How did it go, Mrs. Blackwell?" he asked, as he held the door open for her. "About as expected, Harold. Take me to the office, please. I have some calls to make." As the car pulled away from the cathedral, Dorothy allowed herself one last look back. The wedding party was still posing, the photographer directing them through various groupings. In a few hours, they would all be at the country club for a reception that cost more than most people's annual salaries, a reception that James Patterson could afford because of her anonymous support. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact marked simply as Mitchell. Her finger hovered over the call button for a moment, then pressed it. "Mitchell & Associates? This is Dorothy Blackwell. I need to speak with Mr. Mitchell immediately." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwell. Please hold." As the car wound through the city streets toward her office building, Dorothy watched the familiar scenery pass by. She had built a life here, created a legacy here, helped countless families and businesses thrive. But she had done it all from the shadows, always careful to avoid credit or recognition, always preferring to let others believe in their own success. "Dorothy," came Mitchell's voice through the phone, "I hope you're not calling about any second thoughts. Everything is in place as we discussed." "No second thoughts," she said firmly. "Proceed with the plan. I want everything terminated by close of business Monday. The construction company investments? All of them. The real estate development funding? Every penny. The gallery sponsorships and art purchases? Everything, Mitchell. I want every trace of my support removed from their lives. Let them see how well they fare on their own merits." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mitchell had been her attorney for 20 years, and she knew he was calculating the full implications of what she was asking. "Dorothy, this will be devastating to them. James Patterson's company will likely face bankruptcy within 6 months. Michael's development projects will collapse. Sarah's gallery won't survive without your anonymous purchases." "I understand the consequences," Dorothy replied calmly. "I've supported that family for 3 years, hoping it would contribute to Robert's happiness. But I realize now that my generosity has only enabled their arrogance and sense of entitlement. It's time they learn to stand on their own. And if Robert comes to you for help, Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, watching a young mother push a stroller across the crosswalk in front of them. Robert made his choice 3 years ago when he filed for divorce. He wanted his freedom, and I gave it to him. What he does with it now is his responsibility, not mine. Very well. I'll begin the process immediately. The loan recalls will go out Monday morning, the investment withdrawals will be processed by Wednesday, and the ongoing sponsorships will be terminated by Friday. Thank you, Mitchell. And remember, complete anonymity, as always. They'll never know the support came from you, just as they'll never know why it stopped. Dorothy ended the call and leaned back in her seat. Through the window, she could see her office building rising 30 stories into the blue sky, the discreet brass nameplate reading Blackwell Enterprises, the only indication of who owned it. Most people assumed it was named after some long-dead industrialist, not the quiet woman who had built it from nothing. The car pulled into the underground garage, and Dorothy made her way to her private elevator. Her assistant, Emma, was waiting in the outer office with a stack of messages and a concerned expression. Mrs. Blackwell, you have 17 messages from the Morrison Charity Gala Committee, 6 from the Children's Hospital about the new wing dedication, and 3 from the mayor's office about the waterfront development project. Dorothy nodded absently. Cancel my appointments for Monday, Emma. I'll be making some significant changes to our philanthropic portfolio, and I need time to review everything. Of course. Also, there's been a reporter asking questions about your involvement in the Patterson construction success story. Shall I? Absolutely not, Dorothy said firmly. No comments, no acknowledgments, no confirmations. As far as the public is concerned, I have no connection to the Patterson family whatsoever. Emma nodded, making notes. She had worked for Dorothy long enough to know that her employer's privacy was paramount. Understood. Will you be attending the wedding reception this evening? Dorothy paused at the door to her inner office. She had not even been officially invited. Her presence at the ceremony had been her own decision, a final gesture of, what? Goodbye? Closure? She wasn't entirely sure. No, she said finally. I think I've seen enough weddings for one lifetime. Chapter 2. The Reception. The Grandview Country Club had been transformed into a fairy tale setting for the Thornfield Patterson reception. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface, crystal chandeliers cast romantic light over the ballroom, and a 12-piece orchestra played soft jazz as guests sipped champagne and mingled. Robert stood near the bar, accepting congratulations from a steady stream of well-wishers. He looked handsome in his formal wear, every inch of the successful politician and businessman. At 58, he had managed to maintain the physique and bearing that had first attracted Dorothy all those years ago. Quite a turnout, commented Marcus Webb, Robert's campaign manager and longtime friend. Half the city council is here, 3 county commissioners, and I counted at least a dozen major donors from your last campaign. Robert nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Have you seen Dorothy here tonight? Marcus frowned. Your ex-wife? Why would she be here? I saw her at the ceremony. 3rd row, navy dress. She was there, Marcus. I'm sure of it. Robert, you're imagining things. Why on earth would Dorothy come to your wedding? You two haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized. But Robert knew what he had seen. That brief moment when their eyes met, he had felt the same jolt of recognition that had marked every significant moment in their 24-year marriage. Dorothy had a way of appearing in his life at precisely the moments that everything changed, and her presence today felt like an omen, though he couldn't say of what. Across the ballroom, Linda held court among her friends and family, her laughter bright and musical, as she regaled them with stories of the morning's preparations. Her dress had been changed to a sleek white sheath that allowed for dancing, and she wore the diamond necklace that had been Robert's wedding gift, a piece worth more than most people's houses. Michael Patterson laughed. Speaking of houses, Sarah and I were looking at that new development out by the lake. With the gallery doing so well and construction company profits up 40% this year, we might finally be ready to build that dream house we've been planning. The lake development is a wonderful choice, said Linda. Robert and I looked at it for our honeymoon house. The lots there are going for $500,000 just for the land. James puffed out his chest. Money well spent. The Patterson name means something in this city now. We've earned our place among the elite. None of them noticed the quiet woman in navy blue who had been standing near the terrace doors for the past hour, seemingly part of the crowd, yet somehow separate from it. Dorothy had changed her mind about attending the reception at the last minute, driven by a curiosity she couldn't quite name. She wanted to see this new life that Robert had built, this family he had chosen to join. She had arrived late and positioned herself strategically where she could observe without being easily noticed. Her years as a political wife had taught her how to blend into a crowd, how to listen without appearing to eavesdrop, how to gather information without drawing attention. What she heard confirmed everything she had suspected about the Patterson family. They were not bad people, but they were not particularly good ones either. They had taken their sudden financial success as validation of their own worth, never questioning the source of their good fortune, never wondering if perhaps they owed their prosperity to something beyond their own efforts. Mrs. Blackwell? Dorothy turned to find a young woman approaching. Linda's cousin, she thought, based on the family resemblance. "I'm sorry, I think you have me confused with someone else," Dorothy said pleasantly. The young woman frowned. "Oh, I could have sworn. My grandmother said she recognized you from the charity circuit. Are you sure you're not Dorothy Blackwell from Blackwell Enterprises?" Dorothy felt a moment of panic. Her anonymity was crucial to her work, and she had spent years cultivating a public persona so understated that most people never connected her with her company's influence. "I'm afraid not," she said with a gentle smile. "I'm just a friend of the family." The young woman shrugged and moved on, but the interaction had rattled Dorothy. It was time to leave. She had seen what she came to see, had confirmed what she already knew. Her decision was the right one. She made her way quietly toward the exit, avoiding the main gathering areas where Robert and Linda were holding court. She was almost to the door when she heard her name. "Mary?" She froze. Only one person in this room still called her by her old name. She turned slowly to find Robert approaching, his face a mixture of surprise and something that might have been hope. "I thought I saw you at the ceremony. What are you doing here?" Dorothy studied his face, noting the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage, the slight softening of his jawline, the way his left hand unconsciously moved to his wedding ring, a new one, she noticed, not the one she had placed there 26 years ago. "I came to wish you well," she said simply. Robert's expression softened. "Mary, I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure if you would want to, after everything that happened between us." "What happened between us was a marriage that ran its course, Robert. There's no shame in that." He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I know things ended badly. I know I hurt you. I want you to know that wasn't my intention." "I know," Dorothy said, and she meant it. "You fell in love with someone else. It happens. I'm not angry about it anymore. Are you happy?" he asked suddenly, the question seeming to surprise him as much as it did her. Dorothy considered the question seriously. Was she happy? She was successful, certainly. She was fulfilled by her work, both in business and in philanthropy. She had friends, though few knew her well. She had her independence, her financial security, her ability to make a difference in the world. "I'm content," she said finally. "I hope you will be too." Robert nodded, though he looked somehow disappointed by her answer. "Mary, I want you to know that I never meant for things to end the way they did. The lawyers, the negotiations, all that ugliness, I never wanted it to be so adversarial. Divorce is rarely pleasant, Robert, but we both survived it."
I also want you to know that I never took you for granted. Everything you did for my career, for our life together, I appreciated it more than I ever told you. This was new territory, and Dorothy wasn't sure how to navigate it. During their divorce, Robert had been defensive, almost hostile, as if her very existence was an accusation against his new happiness. This vulnerability was unexpected. "Robert, you don't owe me any explanations. Today is your wedding day. You should be with your wife, not having this conversation with me." I know, but he ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. I just need you to know that you were a good wife, a better wife than I deserved, and I hope that someday you'll find someone who appreciates you the way I should have. The words might have meant something to her 3 years ago, might have provided the closure she thought she needed. Now they just felt like salt in a wound that had already healed, leaving only a faint scar. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "But Robert, that's not why I'm here." "Then why?" Dorothy looked past him to where Linda was laughing with her bridesmaids, her face flushed with joy and champagne. "To say goodbye," she said finally. "To all of it." Before Robert could respond, she turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear him call her name once more, but she didn't turn back. She had said what she came to say, had seen what she needed to see. Outside, Harold was waiting with the car. As they drove through the darkening city streets, Dorothy felt a strange sense of lightness, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "Home, Mrs. Blackwell?" Harold asked. "Yes," she said. "And Harold, starting Monday, we're going to be making some significant changes to our business operations. I'll need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the week." In her purse, her phone buzzed with a text message from Mitchell. "All documents prepared, awaiting your final authorization." Dorothy had typed back a single word. "Proceed." Chapter 3. The Unraveling. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that seemed to seep into bones and souls alike. James Patterson arrived at his construction company's headquarters with the same confidence he had carried for the past 3 years, humming the wedding march and still basking in the glow of Saturday's festivities. The Patterson Construction Building was a testament to the company's recent success. 5 stories of glass and steel in the heart of the business district, a far cry from the cramped warehouse office they had operated from just 4 years ago. James parked his new BMW in his designated spot, noting with satisfaction the gleaming company logo emblazoned on the building's facade. His assistant, Carol, was waiting for him with an unusual expression of concern. "Mr. Patterson, there are several urgent messages waiting for you, and Mr. Mitchell from Mitchell & Associates has been calling since 8 o'clock. James frowned. Mitchell & Associates was the law firm that handled his major contracts and investments. "What does Mitchell want?" "He said it was regarding your primary investment accounts and loan agreements. He seemed quite urgent." The first prickle of unease touched James' spine, but he pushed it aside. Probably just some routine paperwork related to the company's expansion plans. He had learned not to worry about every legal detail. Success required trust in your advisors and the confidence to make big moves. He settled behind his mahogany desk and dialed Mitchell's number. "James," came the attorney's voice, tense and formal, "I need you to come in immediately. We have a serious situation." "What kind of situation?" "I'd rather discuss this in person. How soon can you be here?" "Mitchell, you're scaring me. Just tell me what's going on." There was a long pause. Then, "Your primary investor is calling in all loans effective immediately. 48 hours to repay in full, or they begin seizure procedures on your assets." The words hit James like a physical blow. "That's impossible. The loan terms specifically state no recalls for 5 years except in cases of default, and we're current on all payments. There's a clause you apparently missed. If the investor determines that the borrower has engaged in misrepresentation about their financial status or capabilities, they can demand immediate repayment." Misrepresentation? What misrepresentation? Everything in our applications was accurate. "James, just come in. We need to review all the documentation immediately." The line went dead, leaving James staring at his phone in disbelief. This had to be some kind of mistake, some bureaucratic mishap that could be resolved with a few phone calls and the right paperwork. But even as he tried to convince himself of that, his mind was racing through the numbers. The investor, who had remained anonymous throughout their relationship, working only through intermediaries, had provided $2.8 million in startup capital and expansion funding. Without that investment, Patterson Construction would have folded 3 years ago. Even with their recent success, the company's liquid assets were tied up in equipment, contracts, and ongoing projects. They couldn't possibly repay $2.8 million in 48 hours. His secretary buzzed through. "Mr. Patterson,
Your son Michael is online too. He says it's urgent. James grabbed the line. Michael, I can't talk right now. I'm dealing with... Dad, we have a problem. Michael's voice was tight with panic. My development funding has been cut off, not suspended, completely terminated. The bank called this morning and said my investor is withdrawing all support effective immediately. Your investor? Which investor? The silent partner, the one who provided the seed money for the lake development. Dad, without that funding, I can't complete the projects I've already started. I have contractors waiting for payment. I have buyers who've put deposits down on houses that aren't built yet. This could destroy me. James felt the room begin to spin. Michael, how much are you into them for? $800,000, but it's not just the debt. They were supposed to provide another $1.2 million for the next phase of construction. Without that, I can't fulfill my contracts. I could face lawsuits from every buyer. Listen to me carefully, James said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Don't panic. Don't make any statements to anyone. I'm going to figure this out. But even as he said the words, James was beginning to understand that this was no coincidence. The timing, the simultaneous nature of the financial attacks on both him and his son, this was coordinated, deliberate. Someone wanted to destroy the Patterson family, and they were doing it systematically. His phone rang again. This time it was Margaret. James, something's wrong with Sarah's gallery. She just called me in tears. Apparently her major patron, the one who's been buying all her expensive pieces, has not only stopped purchasing, but is demanding the return of several paintings they claim were bought under false pretenses. False pretenses? What false pretenses? I don't know. Sarah's hysterical. She's saying something about fraud allegations and potential legal action. James, what is happening to our family? Before James could answer, Carol appeared in his doorway, her face pale. Mr. Patterson, there are 2 men here from the bank. They say they need to speak with you immediately about your commercial loan. James felt his world beginning to crumble around him. In the space of 1 hour, everything he had built over the past 3 years was falling apart, and he had no idea why. His phone buzzed again, with a text from Michael. Dad, I need to talk to you. Sarah too. Can we meet at your office? This is bigger than any of us realized. He typed back, come now, bring all your paperwork. As he waited for his children to arrive, he found himself thinking about the wedding, about the joy and confidence they had all felt just 2 days ago. Linda was off on her honeymoon in Tuscany, blissfully unaware that her family's financial world was collapsing around her. Robert was with her, probably equally oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Michael arrived first, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his tie loosened and his hair messed from running it through his hands. Sarah came in shortly after, her eyes red from crying, clutching a folder of legal documents. Dad, this is coordinated, Michael said without preamble. My financing didn't just get cut, it got surgically removed. Someone with serious legal and financial resources is deliberately targeting our family. Sarah nodded miserably. The gallery situation is even worse, Dad. It turns out that almost 60% of my sales over the past 2 years were to the same anonymous buyer, working through different auction houses and art dealers. They've not only stopped buying, but they're claiming that some of the pieces were purchased based on fraudulent authentication. Fraudulent authentication? That's ridiculous. Every piece in your gallery has been properly verified. I know that, Dad, but they have lawyers, really good lawyers, and they're saying that if I don't return the specific pieces they purchased, along with a 20% penalty for their trouble, they'll sue for fraud and have the gallery shut down.